And what's going on, everybody? This is Bait from Biomassed.com. If you've been listening, you know that EVE Fanfest was this weekend, the 12th through the 14th. Today is actually the last day, but as far as we can tell, we've had everything Project Nova related revealed or shown. So I kind of wanted to get together with a couple of members from the Dust Vets Discord to kind of talk about, what we saw and kind of see what their reactions were and see if we can piece together some of the cryptic hints that we got. So with that, I want to start. Just going to go around the room, introduce, tell who you are. Probably be best to say who you are in the Discord. So Fox.
I'm Fox Gaiden. Back in the days of Dust, I started out as one of the officers in Dust University, and then I founded my own training corps called Immortal Guides, and I was one of the original founders of the Learning Coalition.
All right, Juno?
Hi, I'm Juno. Basically I played Dust for a while. Mainly did like faction warfare rather than planetary conquest. So just enjoyed Dust and waiting for Nova.
And AWOL.
I'm Uncle AWOL. I've been following Dust far longer than any sane person should. And as far as player interactions go, I was with Betamax for most of Dust's life after the corporation was killed. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, thanks, guys. So the opening ceremony, as soon as Hilmar, he went through and he talked about the 15 years of EVE, right? And so, kind of getting to where Nova matters, where Nova comes into play, he brings up this image, and the first thing I want to talk about is this. There's a screen grab of a phantasm of a Sancha cruiser in the background of this kind of foggy looking map. What were your guys' kind of reactions upon seeing that on either the live stream or just after the fact?
Well, that was a pretty cool looking environment to fight in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say as well, it keeps coming up in the Discord in terms of people think moving to space means, it's just going to be corridors. So I think images like that kind of reinforce, you can have it if you're fighting on the surfaces of ships, that you do have that kind of open map available, that you do have that kind of flexibility.
Which is something that's kind of been thrown me for a loop as far as how they're kind of do that as far as map design goes. And like you said, it is nice to see that, okay, this is kind of what they're thinking as far as the level of openness that they want to go for with this.
It looks a lot like a Dust in certain respects. I mean, you got a vast area and you have almost looks like buildings, but they're really ridges on a ship.
Lots of pipes.
Oh my god, yeah, pipes are...
There are a couple of elevated areas with railings and a ramp down on the bottom there. Is
that a turret in the distance?
Yeah, I've been looking at that one, trying to figure out what kind of gun it is. In my mind, it's either autocannons or not autocannons, artillery or turrets.
I'm thinking rail.
You thinking rail? Huh? Because the only thing we know that, as far as maps they've tested, the outside of the ship was the Mimitar supercarrier. But Denny was saying, I don't know if you guys saw this, Denny Fleetfoot was saying in the Discord that this was actually a different map than the one that I guess they got to see or play on or whatever they did. So,
well, it is good to at least alleviate some fears that I was having with the problem of certain weapon types on constricted maps like you would see on the inside of a ship.
What do you mean?
Well, so in general, sniper rifles aren't very good for corridor shooters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially not in the same way that they were implemented in Dust, that is. Because they were very much full at medium to long range.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's something that, as best I can tell, the precision rifle is going to kind of help with, I guess, being a sniper rifle, if you will. that you can use in those corridors, because I think we saw some of that where it was used in the open, but it was also used kind of in the corners of stairwells and whatnot.
I love the fact that they included the precision rifle. So like the rifle that was always promised in Dust and it was never delivered.
Yes.
But I think they're a bit of a victim of their own kind of demo that they gave a couple of years ago, because it's, it was just a 6v6 or, smaller map from what I understand. And it was, corridors. It's kind of like it's skewed a lot of people's visions of what the end game will kind of be. Like, I think that's why they've released these images, so that it kind of show that they are going a variety, as it were.
Yeah.
Trying to bring some spaciousness.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the shot itself, I mean, just like this kind of skybox, like it's kind of like epic, and having that fight that above you, and like obviously that's a static image. If we see stuff moving above us at the same time, then that kind of really does immerse you into the kind of New Eden environment.
Well, that raises a question, because I mean, I would assume that they want the game to run well enough on lower end systems, so I can't see CCP wanting to put too many things going on outside of the battle in the game. You know what I mean?
It's probably just a kind of a movie image that plays the skybox rather than actual tracked objects.
I was about to say, I think I was seeing somebody say that was in the skybox. I don't think I quite understand what the skybox is. Is that's what's outside the map, if you will, or is that inside the map, for lack of a better word?
What you see when you look up as far as the horizon.
Oh, so okay, so the horizon.
Yes.
So everything on the map is kind of put in front of it.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a real nice shot right there. Some of the stuff. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Some of the stuff like here in the background, though, again, they're still kind of hammering that Sancha theme, I guess, if you will. And it kind of does match the wording that Hilmar used during the presentation when he was talking about it. He said that what was it, a new threat or an old threat will rise again.
Yeah.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, was a direct point to the Sancha. Because didn't we have some sort of Sancha tie-in not too terribly long into Dust? There was like a big deal.
I kind of missed most of the events in Dust.
Honestly, can't remember.
Yeah, I can't either. But
it's been too long.
Oh God, yeah, that's
CCP needs to stop putting so many years between things.
Because you're thinking about shit that happened.
Like, oh well, we've only been a company for 15 years, so really no big deal if we take another 5.
Oh no, not at all, right?
This does seem to be a battle between Minmatar ships and Sancha ships. So I wonder if we can get from that this might be a Minmatar ship that we're on here.
Yeah, and that's something that, as I was kind of looking in the background, I could obviously pick out the Sancha ships, the Phantasm right there in closest to the thing, and then the Nightmare battleship. But these ships off here to the left, I can't tell what they are. And I had a conversation, a little exchange with what's his name, Night Guard Fury about trying to figure out what they were. And I think they were Maelstroms, as best I could tell. And I think Thaddeus agreed with me, so that kind of makes me feel a little bit better.
They definitely look like Minmatar. They have the big sails, the big.
The one at the very top is definitely a Minmatar battleship.
It's a battleship?
Hold on. I am 90% sure about that.
I don't know what class the Maelstrom is. That's
the Maelstrom's a battleship.
Oh, okay. So there we go, battleships. Then.
Yeah, the one underneath that massive Sancha pylon, I'm not sure about, but the one at the very top is definitely
the one under the pylon. Oh, okay. I see those. Yeah, I don't know. It's got sails on it, so I guess we're still rolling with some kind of Minmatar ship then. Huh. Now.
So I wonder if this is a game mode where we repel NPC borders.
See, and that's kind of where my mind went to at first.
Unless some of us are working for Sancha.
I don't know. Maybe have some kind of like infection game mode, I guess. If you.
I would definitely like to see bot game modes implemented.
Well, I think that we're going to get some sort of PvE, if I'm not mistaken. At least it's been heavily hinted at that's.
It would go with what Helmer was saying, the whole rise of the old threat or whatever.
Yeah, which I think would be a great PvE kind of topic.
I'm always a big fan of the dual game modes where you have both PvE and PvP, like what the old Star Wars Battlefront games did, what Titanfall did.
Oh yeah.
Where you have both going on at the same time. But
yeah, those can be cool.
I'm also a big fan of dedicated PvE. I've been playing FanFest, Jesus. I've been playing EVE for years, and I've never done PvP. So I think that pretty much sums up my feelings about PvE.
How have you been playing EVE and you haven't done PvP yet?
Not voluntary.
Yeah, not voluntarily. I've been suicide ganked on more than one occasion.
Oh, you poor soul.
I don't think I did any PvP the first year I played EVE back in 2008. I got big time into it, and the entirety of 2012 I was PvP pretty much the whole time.
Huh. Wow. Kind of going back, hitting on this Sancha thing. Hilmar did bring up this image of this kind of I don't know what you would call it, like this cybernetically altered person during the presentation. I think that popped up when he was talking about this kind of old threat coming back. And it immediately, as soon as that went up, the Project Nova chat like instantly threw up images of the. I guess there's some kind of EVE event back in like 2013 that had a Sancha guy that kind of looked like this, except he was a little bit more beat up. So that makes me wonder if that is going to be our quote unquote enemy on launch, or if that's.
I'm thinking you're right, because I don't think this guy really looks like a Dust war clone.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's not a Dust war clone, he's got to be what we're fighting.
Yeah, I reckon so. And I don't know if you guys saw that image of that Sancha zombie, that person, if you will.
I just found it.
But I mean, it looks pretty close to this image that Hilmar pulled up on the.
My understanding of EVE lore is somewhat limited.
Oh yeah, no, mine is.
But as far as cybernetics go, just basing off of this, it seems to me that Sancha is kind of the guy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Since he just has millions, billions, maybe trillions of mindless zombies.
And if you look at the image there, the eye on the left looks like it's cybernetic, and there's it's like circuitry overlaid on top of the left side of him. So he definitely looks like a cyborg.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like what AWOL was saying, that's kind of the Sancha shtick, if you will. All these, I keep seeing the joke pop up about fighting like zombie babies or whatever in the channel, and then obviously that has some kind of truth to it. Lore.
I think someone described it for people who don't know EVE lore as being like the Borg of EVE.
Yeah, I think was it Zarya that was saying
that would be fair.
Yeah, cybernetic zombies.
I mean, let's think of it this way. Philosophically, what's the difference between a war clone and a zombie?
Oh, see, we're getting
circuitry.
Also, as far as I know, we never got to see what the dust clones looked like under their armor. So they very well could be covered in cybernetic enhancements.
Yeah, this is.
And they could just fork that into the lore if they wanted to, no problem.
I did see an artist rendition of a war clone. It was very white, thin-skinned, and not too far off of this, but far enough off that it didn't have any cybernetics.
But it is interesting though, because you've got Minmatar, and obviously that Concord was on the symbols given, so it's kind of like what side will we be fighting for effectively? Because the four empires have exiled us so that we can as clones we can no longer kind of like participate. So it's like, are we being invited back because we're needed, or are we coming back because we've got an opportunity with the pirates?
Sancha's attack would be a really good excuse to bring back the dust clones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. And
how do you counter the mindless zombies?
With more. I think a lot of people are talking about this, and Ratadia said it too, about wanting to tie Nova into EVE through not just a physical link, a quote unquote physical link, but also through this kind of thematic link. And I think this is a really good way to do that. Is at launch or whatever, you have this threat, if you will, that you need to fight against. And something like Saint, I think, is interesting enough to kind of pull people in. I mean, who doesn't want to fight space zombies?
Looking at the I guess I'll call it a trifecta, the three corners of the triangle on the Project Nova newsletter sign-up site.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to me like this is, if they wanted to establish that there were three quote-unquote factions to side with the lore, or three major philosophies or whatever going on, this is how they would do it. Because triangles have very clear symbolism. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's talk about that. So if you're looking at the newsletter sign up webpage, you can find that it's ccpgames.com/Project Nova. Up here in the top right, that's the Concord's emblem, like spitting image of it. And then coming down at the bottom of the screen is something called Arkham Bind, and it's also as best I can tell, it's a pretty close representation of that emblem. What exactly is Arkham Bind? Does anybody have any idea?
I've got a blurb here, like some random EVE website. It says, it's a splinter group of disillusioned clone soldiers betrayed by the nations they swore to serve. They now seek independence and the means to undo what has been done to them. Their ranks are comprised of clone soldiers from all four of the major factions.
In other words, a corporation created to encompass the X players.
Okay. And then, go ahead.
I wonder if Concord and Sancho might both hire Dust war clones, and you have a choice between the pirates and the police.
Well, yeah.
Well, just thinking about it as well, that we know that drop suits, there's no going to be like four of each kind. So it could be that maybe we are in Concord drop suits, and like, you can add corporation firmware, if you know what I mean. So it's like they sanction everything basically.
Yeah, because the drop suit in and of itself isn't it's not a Concord thing, if you will. Like, everybody, from what I understand, has drop suits. So I think I could kind of see that okay, you make your character and you say, okay, do I want Concord, do I want Arkham Bind, or do I want Sanchez? And then from there, you get your drop suit, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So if I have to speculate a bit based off of some of the information that I have, because I've been reading old Biomassed articles all day, trying to be caught up on actual information. If I had to guess, from what I think, my understanding is that there will be firmware upgrades, disposable firmware upgrades for the suits, and that many of those will be related to manufacturing corporations in New Eden. So they wanted to have, let's say, some kind of overarching lore related to Project Nova, then I could see them having these three corporations, let's call them, let's just say there's a corporation, as just extra factions that you get standing with and get firmware upgrades from by doing certain missions specifically for them. You know what I mean? Because okay. I could definitely see Combine wanting something of themselves out of this, not just, oh well, let's just help Concord or help Sancha because hey, money. Like, clearly they have ulterior motives. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the firmware upgrades don't necessarily have to be coming from the same creations that make the drop suits.
Exactly. So they could easily just say, oh, this is a Concord firmware upgrade. And that would fit completely into the knowledge or the information that we already have about the game. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Might be able to pick up Sanchez firmware during the NPC matches.
Right. So they can easily tie it into events. It's also my understanding the firmware upgrades also act as skins in some respect. At least
Oh, really?
CCP Rattati said so, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
I think it has like kind of a base skin, and then you can kind of override that again if you want, to use your specific one.
So if you
yeah,
put
that
on
makes
like I can't remember the exact thing, and it'll take me a while to find it if I wanted to. But if you have a Koyota or however you pronounce it firmware upgrade, and you put that on, it will change the colors of the suit to match that.
The colors were gold, weren't they?
For Calcutta?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Which would also be useful for gameplay things too. Because if someone has an abnormal color for their suit, then you can assume, oh, maybe they have a firmware upgrade. You know what I mean?
Right. That'd be useful.
Okay.
Which is an easy way of identifying people that are. So if you have two heavies coming towards you that seem to be using the exact same stuff as far as you can tell, but one of them is a different shade of gold, then you can assume that one might be a bigger threat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
and that would be useful for gameplay purposes.
Sure.
It would be, but skins for aesthetic purposes would be a good moneymaker. So I'm thinking the aesthetic skins will probably overwrite the firmware upgrade. May have a suit changing look, but I'd say the skins would overwrite those.
Most likely, or they would at least let you have the option.
Yes,
if you want, because firmware is temporary. So
I think you have the option of whether you want to install a skin or not. So without a skin, you get the firmware's look.
But yeah. So basically, what I think is that if they're going to do a launch event centered around, just completely speculative, centered around Concord, Sancha, and our Combine, I think that they'll probably do that, or they'll have unique firmware that you get from one of those factions.
So then I guess I'm misunderstanding, at least as far as how you described it, what firmware is then, because I thought firmware was something that you had to have, not that it was something you could optionally put in.
Well, it's like it modifies the base variable. So let's say you had like a heavy that has like 10% on extra AOE damage, like kind of thing. You could have a firmware that can maybe switches that, so it's 10% on reload speed or something like that. So it's firmware like changes the base kind of. I don't know if it's stats, but certainly like bonuses kind of.
Okay.
Well, because my Rattati explained it as specializing, other means of specializing, because there's other things that he said where you could specialize in weapons and drop suits by using them. Like they would be for anyone here who has played Warframe, they're similar to Warframe specific mods that you can slot in. So you can easily run without them, no problem. But if you want one ability to do something a little different, then you can slot one of these in. And now you're more specialized towards that one thing and less towards other things. You know what I mean?
I think as well they will give you or can possibly give you a slight numbers advantage as well, because they're a consumable item. So I don't know if that's just in that they allowed you to create very specific fits that are very good at certain things. But he said before that because it's consumable, it may give you more power.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, being a consumable item, that's kind of a balance thing. They can have them actually give you more power rather than just distributing stats.
I'm still a little worried about though. Anytime where I hear
proto suits returned.
Yeah, pretty much. Anytime where I hear that some players can use even a disposable item to have a slight advantage over other players, I get a little squeamish, because I think that it's potentially hazardous. Because there's the issue of, okay, so do we balance the game around people that aren't using the firmware or people that are? You know what I mean?
Yeah, good point. I kind of like the modifications where you take away from one stat and add to another. Despise.
Well, I think it's what they were hoping to focus with. I'm trying to find it.
I think the issue is there's a lot of like kind of variables. Like, I mean, if you have firmware as kind of the thing you commit to end game content. So, so that's where I think like a legitimate edge could be allowed. If you're in a corp that is specifically getting all these kind of great equipment and you're using that as an advantage, then I think that's justifiable, because it's like it'll have an economic cost to it, so you can put more money into it, like within a tolerance, if you know what I mean. Obviously, like the progression in Dust was like off the chart kind of thing, in terms of like, a beginner to bet.
Well, yeah,
I think having that
because
kind of slight advantage.
It could blow up like crazy. You could have 4 or 5 people that were just running their top gear in a pub match and just totally stomp everyone else because they didn't stand a chance. So I guess I'm sure CP will consider this issue.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, there's so much we don't know about the system at the moment, and it's just wait and see, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as where I stand on the whole thing, kind of bringing in the concerns that you brought up, AWOL, I think for me, as long as I don't know, as long as there's a way for everybody to get it in game without what's the word? Without paying real money for it, then I really don't see a problem. I mean, you're using something that you got in the game by playing the game to then play the game. So I mean, I don't think I have that much of an issue with it. So long as it's not like you can tell, like okay, in Dust you could tell who was running different tiers of suits, right? As long as you can't immediately tell that this guy has a firmware based on either damage you're receiving or other modifiers, I guess. Then I don't think it'll be that big of an issue. But I mean, then again, like we said, we don't know. We really don't know how it's going to work.
This may be off the top of the presentation a little bit, but I'm kind of really hoping that the setup in Project Nova puts a place for both the hardcore players and the casual players. I've always hoped of course, it won't be there in the launch, but when they eventually do Planetary Conquest or some other form, Space Station Conquest, whatever, that they have some kind of money-producing operation that can be done by the casual players in the Corp and requires actually work by the players, but is fun.
Well, there's talk of like PvE, and I think with EVE's focus on the MPE being PvE, I think maybe they might try the same kind of approach in Dust, where there is that kind of activity to kind of like learn the basics, or even if they just added something like a firing range, because I think that was one of the requested features in Dust, really.
Was a firing range?
I think
so. You try out weapons you didn't have skills for.
The issue with there were 2 issues. One, if I'm building a bunch of different loadouts and I want to see how they affect different enemies, damage values, range effects, and whatnot, the only way you could do that in Dust was to play the game, or just rely solely off of the numbers that were given to you. And then there was also the issue of, I don't know if I'm going to like this until I put skill points into it. You know what I mean? And that's also potentially annoying. You know what I mean?
Especially with like the malicious being like so different as well. Like you did have like a smaller clip, or it did like have less range, or it did obviously do less damage, kind of thing. I mean, you could try something and be put off, even though it's actually kind of decent enough. If you know what I mean, like that's the risk. Like you could, if you're trying something in militia, because of this skill point issue, you don't want to commit to it, and it kind of like I say, people get the worst impression of the weapon.
And that's also the other problem, is that using the militia weapons is part of the problem, or was part of the problem in Dust, because you could easily just say, oh, I kind of want to try the scrambler rifle. I've never used it before. Let's just see what it's like. And then you just next 3 games just happen to be proto stomps, or you happen to play against players where the scrambler rifle just wasn't the best weapon for the job. You know what I mean? And then you're immediately put off from it for, weeks, months, whatever. Which is why having a shooting range is nice. It's always nice to have a nice little thing where you can just go off and try things, see how different things affect damage and whatnot.
Speaking of militia weapons, I don't think we're going to have militia weapons per se in Project Nova from the way it's laid out, but it would be cool to have militia-like weapons that have a much lower resource requirement. Like, I don't think we have power grid is replaced with something else, but say a low power grid, so that you could use a sniper rifle with only 3 shots in it, in order to fit a stronger armor plate or a stronger shield.
So as long as this information is still accurate, because some of it was written by Ritati a while ago at this point.
Yeah.
And a lot of things can change in that time. Based off of what I've read, my understanding is that all of the class 1 weapons and drop suits such will be available to people from the very beginning.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about militia weapons not the thing.
And they are basically, imagine I'm gonna talk about COD in space, so don't. So think old like Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare 2, how when you first started you didn't have any custom classes.
Right.
You had just the set classes. My understanding is that the system in Nova will work similarly, where you will have a bunch of classes. So you'll have the logistics class, the Vanguard class, the infiltrator, or whatever, and they will just have that equipment for that class. And as you use that class, then you will begin to unlock more options for it. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's the same thing, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, we're working off of 2-year-old information. With weapons as well. I remember Ritati explicitly saying that you get XP for using X weapon, right? So if I'm using a plasma rifle, then I'm going to get experience for my plasma rifle, which in turn, I think he was alluding to maybe being able to unlock slots for it, but I could be totally wrong. I mean, what else would you use XP for from a weapon?
They were saying that they've got kind of the weapon modification. So I think rather than having like a breach AR and like an assault rifle, if you know what I mean, all that kind of stuff,
yeah,
you'll be able to basically make those modifications just by altering the base model, by like, you know, putting a different scope in or putting a different magazine in, or that kind of tweak will be your level up of the weapon chain, basically.
Yeah, right. Which would be nice.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was saying. It'd be nice to be able to take a rifle and maybe reduce the clip size, and then we add a larger battery or something, so it doesn't require so much power grid from the suit.
Yep, I think
be good for like a Logi.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
You want to have a bigger paratool, so you use a weapon with a smaller clip.
So I think as far as the progression with weapons and suits goes, in general, I think the word of the day is specialization. And I think that based off of what I've seen and read, what CCP wants is they don't want one that has the class 2 upgrade for the logistics suit to just be straight up better in every single way. You know what I mean? So like even though the class 1 suit is good, but once you get to class 2, now I can say, okay, I want my logistics class to be a little bit better at combat, not so good at helping people. You know what I mean? And really, you're being with trade-offs with everything. You know what I mean? Yep. Because straight up aggression is problematic, as we've seen.
Yes, the customization and the specialization that made Dust cool, and I think they're going to continue that just in a kind of a new system.
One that's hopefully less problematic for new players, because I mean, they did the thing where new players for a short time were in a special matchmaking until there were a war score. It's been so long. I honestly have so much trouble remembering this stuff.
The academy.
That's exactly how it worked.
But then as soon as you were out of that, you could easily go into your next match, and your next 10 matches you could just get completely wrecked. And that's just not fair. And it was due to no fault of your own other than the fact that you didn't start playing the game when everyone else did.
Yep.
I think as well, like Dust was a bit misleading because you've had all those core skills that acted upon. So you could be in the same, you know, drop suit as someone. I'm, you know, just running advanced, they're running advanced, but my bullets are doing more damage, or, you know, like having less spray, and I've got a lot more health kind of thing. That's what I think skewed it a lot more, because like I say, it's the same suit, but you've got an inbuilt advantage.
And that, I think, is the EVE effect, if you will.
Yeah, the EVE thing.
Yeah.
That was definitely EVE rubbing off on Dust, and yes. I think they should have thought about that one a little more.
Right, because there are ways to make your game quote unquote like EVE without making it EVE with a gun. If that makes sense.
So I think that's something Ratati's often said.
I have one quick question.
Yeah,
when people left that little training match area, were they allowed to reallocate their skill points?
Ooh.
No.
They weren't.
I don't think so.
No, you never got a free respec unless they did like significant changes to the game.
I think that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that shouldn't be a problem in Nova because
No.
it's your skill up by using the weapon. I really think that's a cool way of doing it.
I think that's a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, I think that is a much more FPS focused way of doing it. The EVE approach works because it's EVE. Doesn't mean that it works for shooters and fighting games. And
no, not at all.
it causes problems because even, I mean, skill gaps are the problem. In EVE, there is a certain skill gap with, I mean, at the end of the day, if you can right click and left click, you're 50% of the way there. You know what I mean? But with shooters, there's a bigger skill gap. So I could be way better at the game than you, and I also have a 5% bonus to my power grid capacity, which lets me put on one extra armor plate, which means that when you fight me, even though we're both using the same suit, I just have slightly higher stats, and now suddenly I'm completely destroying you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's like because I knew that, okay, these are my, let's say, my core 8 skills that I need to get to 4 or to 5 even before I even want to think about what racial suit I want to spec into, what equipment I want to spec into, what weapon I want to spec into, and obviously that was a problem because there was no MP, I guess is what it comes down to at the end of the day. There was no thing to say, okay, you can skill into whatever you want, but this is what we recommend, right? We recommend you have PG CPU upgrades to 4 or 5 or what have you. It's just, okay, skills here, go 5.
It was completely missing a system to inform players of things that they should and shouldn't do.
Right.
And I mean, and then that's the problem, because even on the EVE front, CCP has spent countless hours, probably tons of money, trying to improve the new player experience for EVE, and they've overhauled it quite a few times.
Yes.
Because it's and at the end of the day, like, CCP wants the game to be difficult. They want it to be deep. And have an engaging experience. But if 50% of your new players just stop playing within the first week, you've got a big problem. And Dust definitely had that problem.
And if they do it right, maybe we won't need training corps like the one I ran.
No, we shouldn't.
Yeah, right.
But I can run some bad NPC corps.
That'll never happen.
But as long as there's any Fleetfoot, we're still going to have Nova University.
Yes, definitely.
But I think the developers would be naive as well, because in terms of they kind of expected people to have this progression. You know, they start off in pubs and they do faction warfare and they do T, and they kind of forgot that people actually just like to stomp. Some people just like to stomp in pubs, basically, with all their pro stuff, and
And some people just like to play the. I mean, I think I probably made 2 or 3 PC matches in the entire lifespan of Dust, because I mean, I just wanted to get on, mess around with fittings for 2 hours because that was fun, and then just play a couple of pub games, and then all right, I'm done.
Yep,
that's enough for the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all I really did too. I think I did 1 PC match, and it was a no-show. So I had Jack Menaheim with me. We got on a drop ship, and I shot a mass driver and a forge gun down at our teammates. It was good fun. But I mean, most of the time, I'm running around in pubs or in FW, not, just fucking around, honestly.
Yeah, just
my
play
corp
the game,
actually had a couple of districts for training purposes. I had the fun experience of another corp attacks, and I recruited Ancient Exiles to come in and defend my district. So I got to play a PC match with Ancient Exiles.
Oh, nice.
That was fun.
So that's one of the issues that I think Gritati is still working on, though, in terms of like because I was living in Australia, so I had the Australian internet to deal with. And he's saying that the different regions, like he doesn't want America to go against Australia or the UK, or so that kind of, are they going to be basically region locked for the end game content to avoid the kind of lag thing that was always against Dust?
Having the one big server thing works well for EVE because of the nature of the. But there's a reason why League of Legends and Dota and Counter-Strike, big like that, they try not to put people together. because it just doesn't work. When you're dealing with when the difference between winning and losing is milliseconds, it doesn't work. You know what I mean?
This leads to a frustrating experience because you want to know that you've died because you did something wrong, not because you rubber banded or you just you thought you were around the corner but weren't.
And I think there were a lot of issues in Dust with the hardware specifically because, and that PlayStation had trouble. It definitely had trouble.
I hope with the region locks that you have some options in there, because I think I have a better ping on Europe than I do on Texas.
That's interesting.
Well, I live within 100 miles where the deep sea cables go across the Atlantic.
That could contribute to it.
You're set. So kind of pulling it back in here. We got way the fuck off topic. I hadn't realized.
Whoops.
No, it's totally okay. I think this is really healthy conversation to have. So we kind of refreshing. We talked about the symbols on the Project Nova newsletter. No, we did. We missed one. So the top left corner, right? We have Sancha. At least that's what people are saying it is.
It's not an exact match.
It's not an exact, and it's bothering me that people are like, "Oh my god, it's Sancha." But I mean, we've seen Sancha ships in the screen cap. But then when we come to the triangle, to the trifecta of factions, if you will, it's not quite Sancha.
It could be a new faction of Sancha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it could easily be a subgroup of Sancha that's just war clones.
It definitely has the same look to it.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I think that given the context, it's either something completely new and we're totally off base, or it's Sancha, given context based off of other things that we've
I wonder
seen.
What those partial circles in around the middle is.
Those look cool.
Yeah, I don't know if it's aesthetic or if it's got something behind it or not.
Actually, if you zoom in really close, you'll see numbers in base 32.
Do you see the 15 on those circles?
If you reverse all the numbers and then put them through a Turing machine.
But we think that Sancha might be the PvE enemy that we're against, if they are like a kind of zombie style, slaves we're fighting against.
Well, I think
what I'm hoping.
That's what I'm also hoping. But I think based off of as far as PvE goes, with the thing that I remember most was 2013 FanFest, because I was there. During the presentation, when they were showing off concept art for drones.
Yeah.
Which is, as far as I know, that's where they wanted to go with the PvE. But I can immediately see issues related to that because they aren't, for one, players. And smaller, I mean, at some point, the drones can't provide the same experience in PvE that you would from facing players because they're not people. They're drones. But guess
I'd like
what?
to see both.
We do have a bunch of drones that are in the shape of people in the EVE universe.
Yeah, I think as well, like, because this obviously is a PvP game, and like say you introduce the PvE enemies with the drones, like a weapon like the laser rifle, where you can you'd be able to target them forever, and you'd never lose the kind of, since they're big, you'd be able to hit them the whole time.
Exactly.
That would be inherently unbalanced. So I think, going with a kind of a drop suit model you're fighting against makes sense.
Not to mention, it makes the art team's job significantly easier. Well, let's just throw a couple tentacles and cybernetics on there. All right, we're done.
Yeah.
That only took 2 months instead of 6 years.
With the drones, though, you could get a progression between from very little drones to really big monster boss drones.
Yeah.
So there is that.
Right. I think that in general, with if it's Sancha, again, they can do a lot more with that than they could do if they were just rogue drones. Because rogue drones, at the end of the day, they're just rogue drones. That's all they are. But Sancha's got stuff going on.
Right.
I do agree with you there. I would sort of like to see a combination. I would like to see maybe the Sancha at the beginning, but maybe rogue drones come in as a second NPC type later.
Yeah, I think that once they have the underlying mechanics in place for a PvE experience, because, I mean, developing AI that's not stupid is difficult. I can definitely see them bring out after that, because you don't want to keep the experience stale, obviously.
Sure.
There's probably more likely to be kind of off-the-shelf AI for humanoids than for drones.
I kind of hope that obviously that this is some sort of PVE tease, I guess, if you will, because I think most everybody, when it does come up in Dust Vets and just talking elsewhere, I think a lot of people do want some sort of PVE that they can go to if they're frustrated with PvP content, or they just want to chill. So having something there that kind of gives them that opportunity, I think is really important. It's something that people want. So in my deepest parts, I'm really hoping that that's what CCP is saying here. They said, okay, we know this is what you want. We're not quite ready to talk about it yet, but this is us telling you that, yeah, you're going to get this without explicitly saying that. So I kind of hope that's what it is.
Well, it seemed like this presentation was almost focused mostly on the NPC experience, without actually saying that there was going to be an NPC experience.
Yeah.
Well, I think that at the very least, even if we leave the speculation for BE and whatnot, it's Sancha, Concord, and our Combine being involved in some way is probably the easiest and most stomachable lore reason for Warps to return.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if you get Concord involved, then it's like, okay, well, now Concord's involved, so now it's not potentially a problem because of you got all these illegal war clones running around.
Right.
You got our Combine involved because they're a group of war clones, and you got Sancha involved because Sancha is a great boogeyman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And Concord is non-factional. It's across all the factions, so that gets you away from the whole faction aspect.
Yeah.
So I think that in general, at the very least, these three are probably their best bet for tying in lore reasons for why war clones are suddenly doing things again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As well as with our Combine giving a reason for, okay, so what happened to all the Dust guys? You know what I mean?
Yep. And let's kind of talk about that. So Hilmar also during this presentation threw up this timeline, going all the way back to 2012 and stretching as far forward as 2019. Obviously, 2018 is a long ways in terms of Dust and Nova and Legion and other shit from 2012. So we're at the tip of almost at the tip of the timeline. But some of the stuff that they had up on here, particularly through this blue part, this part that they're calling Exile, kind of got me thinking. So if you're looking at it, we're divided up into 4 parts. We have Templar 1 starting at 2012, and then 2014 is the rise of the Dust Merc, if you will. 2016, obviously in line with the shutdown of Dust. We have Exile, and then 2018 and 2019 is the quote-unquote rise of the War Clone, which is a stupid name. It really is. I don't like it.
Maybe they'll repurpose that old Dust commercial where the drop suits come out of the dust. Ooh, the rise of the War Clone.
That was a good commercial there with the dust.
Yeah, it was good. I liked it.
I gotta say,
I
it's
never
nice to
saw
get
it again though. They showed it at FanFest, and they were like, "Hey, look, a commercial," and then it disappeared.
But I think the timeline as it was kind of necessary from like a business decision point, because Nova has been a project that's had to pass the various checkpoints, and when they shut down Dust, there was no guarantee there was going to be an ever return from exile. So I think that's why they've been quiet in the lore. And so long as I think the move now, so it's on PC, means that EVE players will be a lot more accepting of Merc events changing the lore in EVE, basically.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would agree with that.
I like the fact they finally got away from us being mercenaries, and we can now call ourselves war clones.
Yeah, something more legitimate, I guess. Which I guess is kind of what you have to do if you're going to bring Concord into this. At least in my mind, right?
From a lore perspective, I think it would be a little unbelievable for Concord to go around advertising that they're hiring millions of disposable mercenaries to fight their battles for them.
I like mercenary being a conscious choice, a career path than a default.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think?
Well, I think that's also the issue, because if they want to branch out, if we were still mercenaries, why would mercenaries be doing other stuff that's not mercenary work?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But if you just say war clone, okay, we can do a lot more with that word. You know what I mean? You're
Very
not
generic.
You're not artificially limiting the role play potential of people. You know what I mean?
Well, to me, war clone. You talk about this conscious decision. War clone almost, or at least with the word mercenary, war clone almost sounds like we're being forced, I guess, to do it. But I don't know. I mean, that's what I think when you say war clone. Yeah, like Concord has either is making us do this thing, or
Well, it's
or
because
something.
party clones are more expensive.
Well, if we're going to actually consider the book to be something that should even be mentioned ever again, Concord, near the end of book Templar 1, they had that scene with the agent that they deployed on a planet to figure out what the hell was going on with the Dust Merc test case. Can't remember the name. God, it's been so many years. Where they took he was an experiment to see if they could do the war clone thing. And Concord was like, this is a problem. We need to investigate this. But technically we're not allowed. And they did have a few sections of the book where they talked about a Concord agent that went a planet that this experiment type person was on. And I mean, it makes sense. If suddenly we're speaking from where CCP was at the time, if there were suddenly capsuleers on planets, that's a problem. You know what I mean?
Well, it's an interesting point because I don't think Concord has jurisdiction on planets, but since we've moved Nova into space,
now it's a little different. Technically, that falls under Concord's charter now. But
Okay,
yeah, they did talk about that in the book, which I mean, I don't know if we should take everything in that book seriously, because
Templar
CCP
1 is on the timeline.
Yeah, I was going to say,
it is,
best I
but
can
I
tell,
think we
it's
should
lore.
take it with a grain of salt, because they may retcon certain elements of that book later down the line just because it doesn't work for, you know what I mean? Like, I can easily see CCP completely abandoning it if they want to go in a different direction, and Templar 1 just says, no, you can't do that because of established lore. You know what I mean?
Have they?
Yeah,
has
you get the
CCP
law
done
to
that in
suit
the
the.
past?
It's how you get the law to suit, what you actually want it to, rather than like if you kind of find yourself bound by like kind of the rules you've set up before, it doesn't make a compelling story, kind of thing.
Well, I also don't think people would care. Because it's
I'm sure there'd
Templar
be
1.
a few angry emails.
It's Templar 1.
It's like everybody in lore nerds is going to care, I think.
I also think that even the people that are really big into the Dust lore will say, all right, I get it. Because being restricted by the lore that was set up for Dust, and now Dust, we're trying to move past that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that, I think that even they would understand, because CCP doesn't want Nova to be Dust.
Right.
I very much think they don't want that.
I would think, though, that where possible, they try to come up with a lore explanation for why things changed rather than just negating the original lore out of bounds.
Well, this is wild speculation, but like from the photo we've got or the picture we've got, we're on a ship, so you can reasonably expect that we're either defending it or taking it over. And how would Concord react if someone deployed mercenaries in HiSec on a ship? Like, they can't shoot at the ship or the mercs on it to save it. So, like, maybe that's how Concord are involved. Like, we're kind of a rogue element that's taking over ships, and we've got to try and figure out a response to that.
Kind of cool. So I kind of want to hit on this little exile bit, because I saw this and I thought I've heard of this before. So we have this little blurb that's the establishment of the Bosena Accord War Clone Refuge, and that is, if you're not familiar with it, that is a player specific, player created lore thing, right? A couple of the guys, they're in Dust vets. Night Guard Fury.
It's gone. Faye.
Somebody else, yeah, Golem, I think was in on that one. Maybe Thaddeus Reynolds. Actually built some sort of station out in was it in Malden Heath, where it was out in Losec.
I think that's where they're aiming for, because they had like a citadel.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
like they had a legit station and they advertised it and they wrote. I think I saw some sort of like Constitution thing not too terribly long ago, just maybe about a week ago.
I'm guessing the Bosun Accords.
Yeah, well, I think that might have been what it was. I have to see if I can find the document again.
Yeah, because Ritati actually posted about it today. He liked the idea of like Avalon is what they've called the station. I think it's like the clones like last refuge kind of thing, as they're kind of trying to band together to survive.
Oh, is that what they ended up naming it, Avalon?
Yeah,
Hilmar said Avalon in the presentation. I'm like, I hadn't heard that before, so I kept going through trying to Google see what it was all about, and I couldn't find anything. I didn't realize that was the station.
It'd be very much like CCP to actually use player-created content in their lore.
Mm-hmm. Which is so good because we have so many people who are. I mean, we have a whole fucking channel dedicated to people who are talking about the lore and talking in character and making their own story while we wait for the next game. So I think to have the CEO of the company kind of legitimize that is definitely a step in the right direction. And it's one less lore thing that they have to write, in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things where it makes sense to crowdsource, because there'll be people that are much more an expert in it than like even people at CCP, because it's the game they play and it's what they're committed to. So, I mean, I think there was talk of having like kind of information on loading screens and that kind of. So I think that's like kind of a great thing for like to basically crowdsource the community to do, like have all the kind of like snippets of what's been going on.
That'd be cool to have random snippets of history every time you're loading.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Gotta get that lore in the loading screens. Do it Dark Souls style.
Yeah, I think that's the one actually Ritati mentioned. That's his inspiration.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, he did. He said sometime somewhere in Lore Nerds today, he said something about Dark Souls being his favorite RPG-like game.
He said something in Lore Nerds? Oh my god, I have to...
Yes, he said, Dark Souls is my favorite RPG game, so that's obviously an inspiration.
Well, Project Nova's all memes at the moment with Fanfest.
Oh yeah, look at that.
You know what would be cool if on the loading screen you had this timeline on the side of it, and then kind of a lead line out somewhere on the timeline, and then you have a paragraph of history from that particular point in the timeline.
That would be interesting and not particularly difficult to implement either. And they could easily do that to help inform new players to things that went on before Nova. Every time they're in a loading screen, it's, oh, look, here's a new paragraph about something that happened before in the lore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it would be in just a paragraph at a time where they can read it. They're waiting for it to load up, so they have nothing else to do. So you get a lot more lore into them. That's
why loading screen narrative is always popular, because you're not doing anything anyway. So you might as well read.
Yeah, you just need enough of them, though. I think, like, if it gets the same ones repetitively, it gets a bit boring. But
you need like 20 or 30 of them.
Way more than that. The amount of times you get stuck in a loading screen, or the amount of times I played it.
I would like it to be in the hundreds, but presumably, if Concord and Arcombine and Sancha are involved, and you have all the lore related to Dust and Pre-Dust from Templar 1 and such, I don't think they would have very much difficulty, because they could easily take 15 to 20 of those just for describing what Concord is and what they do.
Yeah,
true enough.
And Sancha could easily be 10 to 15. They could come up with a bunch of stuff for Arcombine if they wanted to, and they could draw on whatever lore or one they want to hold on to and be like, oh, at this point in the timeline is when the first whatever the hell the name of that character was given the implants and became the first quote unquote war clone.
That'd be cool. I'd learn something. I haven't read Templar 1.
It's okay.
It's been a hot minute since I've read it.
It's okay.
Might be better to read it and read the highlights and paragraphs rather than reading the book.
Just post somewhere and ask somebody for the TLDR of it. I'm
Well,
sure
it's also like we don't know how much of it is going to remain canon going into the future. So if you read it, you should do it to enjoy it, not for information.
Even if they had like 30 cutouts for each of these time periods, that's over 100. Well over 100.
Yeah, and they could fill in details about the exile, the things that happened post Dust in those same things, form even people like us that already know quite a bit of the Dust and pre-Dust stuff.
Yeah, certainly. And as the game progresses, every time they have an event or something like that, a new paragraph gets added.
Mm-hmm. They could keep adding on to it, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing as well. Do you reckon they will have a developing story as part of the Nova, release, or do you think it will be like fairly static? Will they have like an event-led like story narrative?
If I had to guess, they'll mostly focus on events, I would think.
Yeah.
Because trying to do like an actual fluid narrative with a game like Nova or a game like Dust just doesn't work for the same reasons it doesn't work for EVE.
Yeah. So I can see here where where Taddy said that they have their backstory fully fleshed out as far as the quote unquote main the main thing. I think I'm in the camp that it'll be done to this. It does make the most sense, which I mean it isn't a bad thing as long as you have nice little opportunities to put the lore into your event, right? So maybe something that you read or you pick up an item from in some end of match salvage or something. You can still work in your narrative for that event, or even your overarching narrative, and have it done well.
They could do that for the thing that you just suggested about picking up in items as endgame salvage. They could do that for lore side quests, I would call it.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
I hate to bring in Destiny, but I'm pretty sure that Destiny does that. So there are a couple of quest lines for exotic weapons in Destiny that reveal lore to you by doing activities after you recover. Like, oh, found this locked strongbox. Now you have to go get pieces to unlock it. And as you get those pieces and complete the quest line, you get more information. And then at the end, you get the gun. And that's one of the ways that later Destiny, when they finally got some of their shit together, that's one of the ways that they tried to engage the player. So you could easily pick up, let's assume that Sancho is involved, and you're fighting for Concord, and you have some locked strongbox as salvage at the end of a match against Sancho, and there could be God knows what's in it, right? And they could write all kinds of lore for this little side quest that's just picked up randomly. Just put in a little random number generator. Every time you finish a match against Sancho, you have a 0.01% chance of getting this. You know what I mean? And I mean, those kinds of things, they engage the player. You know what I mean? So like, and it's just handed off you. If you want to ignore it, go right ahead. But
yeah, I think like adding some like maybe like a weapon, but maybe like a skin as well. Like, you know, because some people will want to have like will not want to spend real life cash, if you know what I mean. Like, so I think that's a good way that, you know, you're not going to give them to that easy because you want people to spend the money, but at the same time you do have these kind of quests. You know, if you're willing to put in the effort and play the game, you can get it.
So they could have, like, jumping off of that, they could have some unique skins or even unique firmware that you get from completing side quests related to salvage that you pick up at the end of a fight. Like, you get some encoded transmission or something, you know what I mean? And then at the end of the quest, and you get a cool skin, and now you have that cool skin and everyone else doesn't.
That's what I think. It was like the faction warfare exclusive skins, because like, you know, that like you couldn't just buy them, you had to earn them. So I think that does appeal. Right?
And if we're going to jump off of that, they could also if, like, say you have to side with one side in this big speculation that we have for Concord, Sancha, and our Combine, they could use that as an excuse to be like, all right, so you picked Concord, you really want to get that cool Sancha skin, you know what I mean? And now they could be like, all right, well, so now you have a really low chance of potentially still getting it, even though you picked a different side in whatever event they're doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that people don't get completely locked out of material just because they picked one side over the other.
Well, it depends if you're kind of allowing like a player market as well, and if you're allowing a player market in skins where, you know, but I think Ratati was saying that part of the because you're kind of aligned with weapons and you kind of build up support, and then they give you access to new weapons, and you have to have like you have to be a certain standing in order to. I'm not sure if you said unlock it or to actually use it.
That is a good question. Honestly, not sure. It seems like one of those little details that could very well be completely different. Since it's been a while. Yeah,
times change, but it's like we effectively using BPOs. So the way like it's not like we can stockpile stuff. It's like we're saying that they offer the materials in order for us to actually use our equipment. So that's why you have to be still aligned with them.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense for Calicoyota to sell you their stuff and they hate your guts.
Yep.
Out of fairness.
So kind of coming back to this timeline, the only other thing really that sticks out to me is for 2018 we have our return from exile. So obviously that says that they're still shooting for some sort of launch in 2018.
December 31st.
Oh God, yeah, December 31st at 11:59.
They'll release a 30-second trailer snippet.
Yeah, exactly.
Of grainy camera footage, where there's actually only 1 second of things that matter. They were like, "We did it, guys. We did it in months, not years."
Oh shit, dude. It's gonna be 6
went
seconds
by the
from
actual
a movie.
position on the timeline. It looks like the return from exile starts in 1st of May. For the end of April, that could have just lined up with FanFest, though.
I think that's what it was. I don't think it, at least personally, that it's indicative of a calendar position, more of just an idea, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
But again, it is still good to see that they're shooting for some kind of 2018 launch, and I think our best bet as far as speculation goes is that we're gonna see something in Vegas. I really think so. It's the only other big CCP event.
The timing would be right.
Do you think so?
It's October, right?
Yeah, it's October like 12th or something, I think.
Like mid-October.
Yeah.
I mean, I could definitely see them showing something at Vegas. I don't know if they will release something.
There's a precedent for Nova stuff at Vegas, right? Isn't there? Or at least Nova being talked about at Vegas.
It was
I think
talked
both for
about
about
last
5
time.
minutes.
What did they say last time? Do you know?
They
Still
announced
being
the
worked on.
Sumo Digital stuff.
Oh, was
We're
that
working on the
announced at
game.
Vegas?
They probably talked about it almost as much as they did at FanFest, really.
Okay. Yeah, well,
Which I am perfectly okay with, to be completely honest with you.
I think the imagery they used in Vegas wasn't new either. It was just pulled from Dust. So I don't think it was a pretty heavy announcement.
What image did they use? Do you know off the top of your head?
It's
If not, that's fine. We can kind of go on.
No, but it is like a classic. One of the basically from the trailers where like the guy is calling in the kind of airstrike.
And he's
kind of
calling in
trailer.
all of the. Yeah, is that the one where he's sitting behind cover and he's like on the radio? And he's like, "I need a dropship here to blow this thing up." Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
That thing was cool back in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
That was cool back in the day.
Not so much now.
Well, when EVE Vegas comes along, if it's in October, if Nova's not ready to go to beta, then it will be close going to beta. So I would think
hope.
at least a tentative date. If they're within a month or two of going to beta, they should have a better idea of the date.
Well,
I would
issue
hope
is I'm concerned about the image of the game beyond the people like us that are in the Discord and we follow this stuff because we liked Dust and we want Nova to be successful.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want them to push out a post beta in October because they feel like they need to. And then I go on PC Gamer and I see this highly critical article of, is this Dust 514 again? Question mark. You know what I mean?
I totally agree with you on that, but I'm saying if they feel they're a month or two from being ready, then they would probably talk about it and maybe give some dates.
Right. I do expect information at Vegas. I don't know if I expect anything beyond that. I don't. I really want them to be as careful as possible with information that do give us, because public information is public, and you can't do anything to take that back. And they could easily ruin their reputation before the game even launches, because they have to make up for something they've already done.
Well, I think they're pretty much following that, considering we didn't even get a demo.
No, there was nothing.
They're being very careful, but I'm concerned that they might break that streak. You know what I mean? Yeah. I am perfectly okay with waiting.
I get the sense that they're not going to tell us a whole lot until it's playable.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like, I mean, Hilmar did say
buttery smooth.
He did say in his presentation, that it's coming along good and we're ready to talk about it more, but that just makes me wonder, what does we're ready to talk a little bit more about it mean? Because based on FanFest, you're still not ready to talk about it. You're ready to tease us a little bit and to mess with us, but you're not ready to quote unquote talk about it. Like, I think.
Well, I think how much of that is that, obviously Dust or Legion around FanFest has got like kind of a bad rap, as it were. So they're not really keen on doing a kind of a big announcement there because they've had like a previous backlash. So.
They know that they need to be careful because of all the hype they generated at FanFest, and then a couple of years later, oh, by the way, we're shutting down the game.
Yeah,
I miss the time of CCP MC Peanut back during Legion development. Remember when he was like, "Hey, this is what I'm working on." The players would be going, "Hey, why don't you try this?" And he'd go, "Oh, I'll try that." And 3 days later, he'd come back. Here's a clip of me doing what you were suggesting here. And what do you think of this? That was awesome. That was during Legion development.
What?
It was about three months after FanFest and that.
I never saw any of it.
But then
I thought it just died to death.
That was before it died.
Doesn't sound like CCP. Listening to players? What?
No, it doesn't. But actually, CCP MC actually messaged me on the Discord recently. I was having a discussion with him. He was saying that I guess the community manager that was helping him post all that stuff. And then that community manager left, and the one that replaced him wasn't as helpful on that. So he kind of suddenly stopped putting stuff up.
The Legion community manager?
Yeah, and then the whole thing, I guess, died after that. But I think he might have left before it died. I'm not sure.
That's weird.
I think he's working for EA now.
Of course he is. I would have thought that they would use Frame for something.
Making them big bucks.
Yeah, dude, fucking over everybody else at EA, man. Good job.
Yeah, but my money.
I understand. I think it was because of the better medical than the CCP Shanghai.
Huh. That's interesting.
But they've recently hired those two positions for Nova, though. I think it's community and like PR, marketing, or something like that. So I think the timing of that, I think it's got to be taken into consideration. I reckon we've actually just picked the wrong Star Wars film, and it's going to be, before the Solo. That'll be the one. Alpha.
Solo's like in a month, isn't it?
I was like June. Oh well.
Huh. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see. Is there a Star Wars flick that comes out this year? No, there isn't. Is there, other than Solo?
I think it's just Solo.
Man, see, he said before the next Star Wars flick, and I lied. I got lied to what happened. So yeah, I think that's, as far as the timeline goes. I think I think we beat that one to the ground, unless there's something else about it that somebody wanted to bring up really quick.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the next timeline when they start their next game.
I like that.
It's just gonna keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, it's kind of nice that the timeline stretches out into 2019. And that kind of gives me some kind of, and maybe it's a false sense of security that CCP kind of knows what they want to do post first year, I guess.
I hope that when I eventually do get my hands on Nova and I launch it with my keyboard and mouse and I start moving around, I don't think, oh, that doesn't feel good. Because if that happens, I'm going to be a little upset.
Just plug in the controller, man. If Nova doesn't have controller support, it's basically COD in space, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, see, I'm actually, okay. So controller support is a must. Obviously, they have to have it.
I would hope so.
But
I suck so bad
there
at
is
controllers.
a very serious issue there. There's a reason why people don't use controllers on PC shooters very often.
Yeah. Fucking nerd. Use controller.
And there are also some game balance issues related to that when you have multiple control means of control. So, for instance, the forge gun in Dust was usually a one-shot kill against a player because it did a lot of damage because it was supposed to damage vehicles. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem is if they have buttery smooth keyboard mouse controls, which they definitely didn't have in Dust because of this very problem, people will, after a couple of months, I'm fairly confident that people will be almost 99% of the time able to land that first shot with the forge gun just because of how much more precise keyboard mouse are. And now suddenly, if you give people a one-shot weapon, they're going to use it, you know?
I see what you're saying, but like, I still think the forge gun is a bit niche. Like, I'm not like, well, I'll be interested to see how much you will use it when there are no vehicles, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see, but it's a concern. The control scheme thing is a big concern because if keyboard and mouse doesn't feel good at launch or closed beta or whatever, it will immediately turn gamers off to it, like that.
Well, I think they've been saying right from the start that the smoothness of the game, the core game aspects, that was their priority right from the start, and the demo they gave at the beginning was kind of to show that they achieved that, and everything I heard that demo back in 2016 was smooth.
Yeah, it's being designed with mouse and keyboard in mind rather than kind of emulation, kind of weird setup, as it were. So I think, yeah, like they're very much focusing on mouse and keyboard. It'll be the case of like whether they actually add any kind of auto aim or like stickiness in the controller support, but I don't reckon they will.
I just think that in general, if they want to support controllers, great, they should.
Mm-hmm.
But they are going to have to make a conscious decision and decide, are we going to balance the game around the mouse and keyboard or not? Because the mouse and keyboard changes a lot and it makes everything completely different as far as precision goes. And plus people have way more buttons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I always felt the controllers didn't have nearly enough buttons.
That's the thing.
Well, see, they have I remember
use of capacitors now. It means like you need that kind of keyboard. Kind of hotkey.
that's gonna be interesting
with the capacitors, with active modules being on suits. Presumably, again, it's been a while since we've got those statements. You definitely couldn't do that stuff with a controller. If you have 2 or 3 different active modules, then you need those buttons. And if you want to stand a chance, then you need to have those buttons hotkeyed so that you can just hit one button. You know,
it should also make corp interfaces a lot easier to work with in the in-game mail and that kind of stuff.
Well, if you don't have to design around a controller, it's a little easier to do menus and whatnot. And CCP has more experience with those kinds of menus anyway.
Oh my God, they do.
And Denny has been in contact with him the whole time, constantly harping on UI. Go Denny.
Yeah, good. He should. He definitely should be.
I do wonder how much will be borrowed from EVE in the sense of because they're doing an upgrade on their like communication system, are they, with the local and stuff like that. Those kind of like like a generic system can kind of apply across games, I think.
Yeah, I can't see any reason not to go with EVE's corp system and communication system.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. I don't think as far as well, no, never mind.
So that raises a question.
There's some things you don't. Some things don't have to be like EVE because it's a first-person shooter, and there's better ways of doing them. But when it comes to corp interfaces and communication, there's no real difference between a first-person shooter and EVE.
I wonder, like, how bare bones the game will be when they first, allow it for, like closed access, because the issue is that. Like you can have all the content, you can have all like the minute-to-minute gameplay being really good, but if you don't have that kind of like social side, I mean, obviously that's what kind of like why everyone's still in Dust, basically the kind of like corp tools and the kind of like that kind of social side. So it'd be interesting at what point they do put that in the game.
Well, in the as soon as we can play it, if they have those things.
I would hope so, that they would at least have the very bare minimum channels, places for people, because we're working with keyboard and mouse. CCP can assume that most of the people playing the game have a keyboard and a mouse. Safely assume. So typing to each other is very much less of an issue than it was in Dust.
Oh my god, yeah. Yep.
So yeah, I would hope so. I very much would hope so, because that could be a problem.
But they're not going to charge you for, what was it, an in-game item in Dust in closed beta where you had to pay for
UVT.
voice comms?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's hope that doesn't see a return.
$2. I would hope it would.
Well, because voice comms and EVE are almost exclusively done by third-party applications, but that's because you have to. Because trying to organize a fleet and such, it just doesn't work. And
the in-game voice comms is very good for helping you get a new player set up a third-party voice comms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But in a shooter, you definitely need to have the.
Can we have third-party, please? Can we not have a Nova quote-unquote voice comm? Can we just all do it third-party? Like, let's not even bother trying to put anything like that.
I don't think that's an option.
Well, what they said with the EVE stuff is they're very much getting off the shelf kind of like comm system and that integrating that. So I don't think it'll be much of a dev time to commit to. Like you say, most people will use third party comms when you in like corp matches and stuff.
Well,
like
yeah,
that.
when you're playing together. But the issue is like public.
Exactly, random
queue match. They need a way to communicate with each other. They have
when
to
you're
be able
using
to.
Mumble and the guy you run into is using TeamSpeak and.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because that's the thing. Like, I mean, there will be new people to the game, and like there will be people like starting their kind of like Nova career, as it were, and squatting up with randoms and putting on comms is like kind of how you kind of build those relationships.
Yep. Now, the one slide that I'm really happy to see in the One Universe, One War, and their statement that they're still committed to that in the long. So they haven't ditched the EVE link altogether. They're just going to have it to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what Hilmar kind of brought up, that he wanted the what was the wording? He wanted the somebody help me out here.
He wanted the games to stand on their own, but then
eventually come back together, right?
Yes. My understanding is it'll be a social connection first, and economic, and then others.
Oh, okay. That's reasonable.
I think that's the good plan.
I was relieved he said that as well, because I think it is a unique selling point for Nova to be like this kind of like it doesn't need it to survive, as it were, but it certainly will draw attention to the game, and it's like they're doing it the right way around in the sense of like they're starting from a strong structure and building upon it. They're not kind of like promising the world and completely under-delivering. Like it's going to be a game.
When
as a
would
service.
CCP ever do that?
I can't think. But like, yeah, so Nova is going to be a continuously developed game, and like we've all seen with Warframe how quickly or how well, how much extra content they've kind of developed over time. So if we have that kind of same mindset of, like we're starting off on a strong base, and there is ambition to, kind of create these kind of unique features, then yeah, I'll be happy.
Yeah, because as I understand it, Warframe wasn't much better than Dust when it came out, and it came out around the same time. And now look at Warframe.
Warframe was
did it
poop.
really? Wow.
It was not I won't say it was bad, but it wasn't great. And then when it came out on PlayStation, that wasn't great either. But the game has just kind of blown up recently.
When did it come out on PlayStation? Was that with
PlayStation 4?
Okay.
It came out. I don't know if it came out on the launch of the PlayStation 4, but it did come out very, very quick to release. But I mean, it's Nova. They need to take their time. They really do. I would very much rather that they take their time and that they don't promise the world.
What I like is that they're trying to control scope, and they've set themselves a goal that's very attainable rather than promising the world. And
I would like the game to be good, please.
I mean, that's how much content do they release with as well, in terms like you can have like good solid shoot mechanics, but if we're playing over like the same 5 maps, then it'll get pretty old pretty quick.
I don't think they'll do that, because Although I am kind of sad because Logic Loop is no longer at CCP. There goes one map guy that we know, isn't a complete idiot. So be curious to see what the new map guy has up his sleeve.
Well, you don't know how much was completed before he left, because I think Logic Loop was good at working out the kind of like the frames, as it were, like where everything should sit in the layout.
We don't know
Obviously,
how
it's
much stuff they just
effects.
had.
This is true.
Like CCP could easily just have terabytes of information related to map design left over from Dust, from Legion, and so forth. And any map maker could easily just go, "Oh, that's a good idea. Let's put that in this game." They've got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I'm interested to see like what the final drop suits look like as well, in terms of like if we're going to the system where there's just going to be one base model of each of the type, then presumably you're going to ditch the whole 4 Empire designs, like so they'll have a unique look, and will they actually be reusing assets?
Did you guys happen to see Denny's cosplay this year? Did you guys get a picture of that?
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
Oh
Very
my
gold.
god! Yeah. As best I can tell, there's no way that's. Let me see if I can find it for you, Fox. There's no way that his cosplay was something that he thought up in his own mind. I'm betting that he got a look at the suit and was like, "Oh yeah, I'll make that for my cosplay." It's just a top. It's not a leg or anything like some of his other cosplay was. Where is it? Here it is.
With the
fucking
number
shoulder
of
laser.
map thing, real quick,
Yeah.
I think that I will hold my opinion on the number of maps that I want at launch until I see the gameplay, because I know that, as an example, in games like Counter-Strike, people just play one map because it's the best map, and all the other maps might as well not exist. And in Siege, as another example, there are very few maps that people like to play on. So I think that depending on how the gameplay works out, it may turn out that only having a small number of maps will actually benefit the game more than having a dozen or two. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it could very well depend on how the gunplay works out in the end.
Because I guess it is quite risky, because obviously it's a lot of time to create a map, and you do get situations like where they can be completely annoying to players. Like, I mean, certainly like when the train map in Dust, when they added the extra red line, I always found really frustrating. Kind of.
Oh yeah, for acquisition or whatever it was.
It was funny in Dust, the map I hated the most when I started became my favorite map later.
Which one was this?
It was the one. It was one of the early maps. Kind of had a bunch of islands of structures, with roads going in between them. Yeah, it was the one with the space shuttle.
The shuttle.
There was a spaceship up on a gantry up above the main.
Oh, dude, that map was so fucking dope. Yes, yeah, it had the MCC.
Yeah. I hated that map when I first started, and then I grew to love it.
Dude, yeah, I got to play that map a couple of times because it didn't seem like it was in the rotation as often as everything else was. Kind of annoyed me. Every time I played it, I loved it.
I just want Skirmish 1.0 back.
I never got to try that because I only started during the last days of the closed beta.
Yeah, it sounds like about when I started as well.
It was the shit. I think that progressing maps is just always a good idea because it doesn't happen very often.
I like the suggestion that someone made for faction warfare. Now, of course, we won't have faction warfare in here, but just the idea of multiple battles in a progressive fashion to accomplish something.
Yeah, I saw that.
With an overall goal in mind?
Yeah.
A strategic goal.
Yeah.
I think Battlefield 1 does that for what's the game mode? Operations, I think, is how they do that.
There are a lot of games that have attempted it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think a good way to do it, too, is if you can queue and follow the whole thing through, but if you run out of time or something, you can just leave after one of the segments and then someone else could queue into it.
I think one that Pokey has pitched before is like, you have two simultaneous battles, like, one on a planet, one in an orbital structure, and like the one in the one at the top, they're fighting over control of the orbital basically, and then that can affect by raining down on the other battle basically. So having simultaneous battles that can affect what goes on to the next one, because it kind of kind of supports that kind of coordinated action of like, you've got there's a reason for having like a larger corporation.
So like the corporation that is in control on the space battle can call down orbital strikes on the ones that are down below.
Mm.
Because then you could have the scenario of like, do you commit your best players to the battle at the top because that the advantage there gives you an advantage down below, or like do you kind of like split it evenly?
They're all the best players. We have only the best players. I mean, and you gotta. The way I see it, there's a lot of things that would do. Obviously, they'll never do any of this stuff near launch.
No.
And a lot of it is, well, if they can get a game off the ground with all of the basics up and running in a reasonable way, then they have a lot of wiggle room to think, okay, is this a good idea? Probably not, but let's try it. The issue with
this thing where you get like a test server as well, where we kind of like they can kind of mess around with some of the variables and see what does work. Like,
would hope that you'd have a test server.
Yeah, they weren't able to have one on Dust because of the way it was set up, but they did get into doing kind of a special event thing where they kind of threw stuff up right near the end.
Yeah, that last day.
Archdukes, invitationals.
Yeah.
Usually a good idea to see what the player base thinks before you do something drastic.
Nah.
And before you accidentally kill the game with one patch.
But we should
CCP
be able to have
has
a
never
test
done
server
that.
for this one.
I would hope we would have a test server for sure. So this final image that was put up, this kind of battle going, is that new or is that
which image?
So if you're on I'm getting all my images from the Biomassed article that Pokey put out. Get to you real quick.
I think it's new to me. Like I've not seen it before.
I was gonna say I hadn't seen it either. I feel like I've seen every piece of fucking imagery that they've put out for this game.
The one he put out.
It's in the Discord.
Have you noticed like
it's
like fighting on the surface of a ship, presumably, because you can see ships in the distance. So I would imagine that would be a new image.
I was gonna say yeah, because I mean, like right here in the background, I'm looking at it looks like an Astero, as best I can tell, a Sisters of Eve ship, which is another Eve faction. They're confusing me with all these factions that they're throwing in right here. But yeah, I mean, as best I can tell, it's this some kind of metal surface structure of a ship, I assume, like what was just said. There being a ship in the background. But this. So I think we decided that it's for the most part kind of new to us, right?
As far as we know.
Okay.
I mean, Dust was in development for a long time.
Yeah.
There could easily just be hard drives sitting in Hilmar's closet full of promotional material that they just throw up one every now and then.
Oh, so what you're telling me is we're looking at some old Dust concept art. Like, oh yeah, this is totally Nova. Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
I don't see why they wouldn't do that.
No, I think with the ships in the background, it's probably Nova concept art because the Dust was mostly on the planets.
Yeah.
I have to get Jadek on the case.
Oh my god, yeah. We'll have to send our hound dog after. Some of these guys that these guys in the foreground are shooting, kind of. I mean, they all look the same, relatively speaking, but the way that they're standing. A couple of them kind of looks unnatural, I guess, or maybe that's just me reading too deep into it. So I wonder if this is kind of a first look at our Sancha friends that we were talking about earlier.
Maybe it could also just be the art style itself with this.
Oh yeah, sure.
Capture because it's very blurred.
Mm-hmm.
And
look almost like they're wearing robes.
Kind of looks like what now?
Looks like they might be wearing robes over their armor. I also noticed a very pinkish glow in their faces, like maybe their eyes light up.
Yeah,
except it's vertical, like two slat.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing as well. I kind of want to know what this thing in the background that it looks like is either shooting lasers or is being shot.
The thing on the left looks like a Maelstrom battleship.
So the big ship on the left is either like it's either an Astero, I think, or it's a Maelstrom if we're going to keep rolling with keep rolling with the Minotaur thing that we were on about earlier. But this thing directly in the middle of the screen is kind of what's capturing my attention.
The big hulking mass
Yeah. So
that makes
maybe,
up the very center of the screen.
Yep. Yeah, that thing. So maybe it's a ship gun, or I don't know. Maybe it's like a fucking mech. Santa dropped a mech on the thing or some shit. I don't know.
We will never see the return of mechs, Bait.
We had mechs?
People wanted them really bad.
Oh,
and
that's
at some
right. 'cause
point,
they
CCP said it will probably never happen.
Oh, that's
And
right.
they were called MTACs. MTAC.
Yeah, man. I want to.
I mean, it might happen, but
Weren't they thinking about having jets in the original as well,
Dude,
right?
they had jets, they had four-wheelers, you had 4 different kinds of Jeeps, and
yeah, they really promised the world,
medium
didn't they?
tanks. They really did, man. Because that Caldari fixed-wing jet looked pretty sick, I'm not going to lie. So I think that about wraps it up, unless there was something else that somebody wanted to talk about. We're kind of running on almost 2 hours here, so it was a long discussion, but it was a good discussion. So is there anything from this fan fest that somebody wanted to bring up?
I think we've just about covered it.
I think we did too. I think we beat everything. So if there's nothing else, kind of just want to roll into shoutouts real quick. We'll start here at the top. Fox, anybody want to give a shout out to, man?
Hey, I'll give a shout out to Denny for staying on CCP's about the UI. I really want to make sure there's good quality in-game mail, because the in-game mail and Dust just suck. I had to maintain my EVE subscription in order to get a decent in-game mail interface.
That's rough. All right, Juno?
I guess I get a shout out to Garm and Nightgate Fury for getting the Bassina Accords, Avalon, in-game lore. It's pretty impressive.
Aiwha?
I'd like to say that CCP, be careful. Make a good game, guys.
Yep,
please.
sure.
If any of you are listening, but don't take your job seriously. We're not Gestapo.
It's got to be caught in space, otherwise it's not going to be successful, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they might as well just sell themselves to Activision at this point.
Oh yeah, dude, for sure, man. For sure.
You got to think these skyboxes are going to make a really good first impression on new players that aren't familiar with New Eden, though.
Especially if it's beautiful. I really want to see a beautiful skybox.
You realize people are just going to start shooting at them, though. Like, it's going to be like, in Dust over again, where people just shooting the MCC. It's like...
It'll blow people's minds, though.
Yeah, no, I think that first image that we talked about with the censorship right there in your face, I know it blew my mind, and it seemed to, based on everything that I saw and what Pokey was telling me, people in the audience at FanFest, like actually in Harpa, were like, what the hell, when they saw this image, and they were really excited for it. So,
can you imagine being out on the surface of the ship on the map and you're fighting, and then all of a sudden that comes over the horizon?
Oh my god,
it would be great.
Jesus.
But they do have to be careful because they don't want to melt the potatoes.
No, yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I think he's aiming for like mid-tiered hardware for this. So
I think that's usually a good idea.
Don't want to kill. We
Because
kill PlayStations. We don't want to kill PCs.
not everyone run Crisis.
As I said, the skybox can be just an animated background. So it doesn't have to track objects or could do any calculations. It can just run that background animation.
Yeah, for sure. It can definitely do that. I think we're gonna call it right here. So I want to thank you guys, the 3 of you, for coming on and sitting here and talking about a game that we haven't had any real new info on for 2 years. It was really good. I think this was a good conversation. So with that, we're gonna go ahead and roll out. Thank you all for listening, and have a good night.